Hey YouTube, it's your girl Remy.
That's Dylan.
Today we're gonna be doing a Q&A, getting to know us basically. It's gonna be our first video on our channels. Let's get into the video.
Let's get it. Let's get it.
Do you want to ask the first question? Or do you want me to?
First question says, when and how did you meet?
When and how? January, I'm pretty sure. January 2020. And we met through my god sister. And she introduced us. Exactly. So
Hold
stop.
on.
No. You don't have to do all that. Get off.
Okay,
Move.
well, you're wasting time for YouTube.
That's what you get.
Good.
A woman is now dead after a shooting in Baldwin. Police say they found 20-year-old RaMiah Griffin in an apartment on Young Ridge Drive on Friday afternoon. We are still working to find more information on this.
Believing motherhood would anchor her with security and purpose, 20-year-old RaMiah Griffin seemed poised for a bright future, a cherished one-year-old daughter, a devoted family, and dreams that soared far beyond her humble Baldwin Borough apartment. Yet, the man she relied on betrayed her trust, shattering the life she envisioned. On February 9th, 2024, the quiet of her neighborhood was pierced by sharp sounds neighbors first mistook for fireworks. Within moments, police were at her door performing a welfare check, only to uncover a devastating scene. RaMiah had been gunned down inside her own home. Her baby girl was discovered nearby, unharmed physically but left crying in confusion, her life forever altered. What made the crime even more disturbing was what unfolded afterward. The man, later identified and arrested, didn't simply vanish from the community or avoid suspicion. He took part in the mourning process. He carried their daughter into the funeral, signed a condolence book, and even stood alongside grieving relatives, pretending to share in their loss, all while concealing the reality of what he had done. Welcome to True Crime's venue, where we bring to light stories of real people, tales of mystery, sorrow, and hidden warnings that often go unnoticed. Today, we're diving into one of the most disturbing homicide cases in recent Philadelphia history. This is the story of RaMiah Griffin, an honor roll graduate, a beloved sister, and a young mother whose life was brutally cut short by the very person who should have been her protector. It is also the story of how a once promising relationship deteriorated into a cycle of control and conflict that ended in tragedy. And it serves as a sobering reminder how domestic violence remains one of the leading causes of death for women in vulnerable circumstances. At 18, RaMiah was filled with excitement for the future. Fresh out of Esto Rocks High School, she was busy working part-time jobs, sketching plans for her next steps, and enjoying life with her close-knit circle of friends. She loved music, late-night drives, and dreaming about what lay ahead. It was during this vibrant chapter that she met Adelin Itongwa, a 22-year-old truck driver. His job took him across state lines, and his stories of the open road intrigued her. With his outward confidence and charismatic nature, Adelin stood out. Their relationship began innocently. Shared playlists, conversations about goals, weekend escapes to the Pennsylvania countryside. Soon, RaMiah's social media filled with clips of their happiness. TikTok dances in her apartment, smiling selfies, affectionate captions, and moments that paint a picture of young love. Adelin seemed just as smitten, surprising her with flowers after long hauls, and speaking proudly about their bond. Together, they started building an online presence. In their joint YouTube Q&As, they spoke over each other with excitement, talking about their dreams, marriage, a home, children, and maybe even businesses. To outside viewers, it looked like a fairy tale unfolding in real time. Her family welcomed Adelin warmly at first. He was courteous, engaged in household activities, and treated her relatives with respect. RaMiah's sister, Mariah, noticed that he occasionally dominated conversations or made choices on RaMiah's behalf, but she chalked it up to personality differences rather than warning signs. Then, after a year of dating, RaMiah learned she was expecting. She was just 19, but instead of fear, her heart swelled with joy. She embraced the pregnancy wholeheartedly, planning for her daughter's arrival with remarkable maturity. Adelin shared her excitement, posting proudly about fatherhood and making promises to provide. Their daughter's birth transformed RaMiah completely. Her energy, once split between work and friends, became wholly focused on motherhood. Her social media shifted, too. Gone were a couple of photos, replaced with images of her child's milestones, smiles, and laughter. RaMiah threw herself into every detail of parenting, determined to give her daughter the best start possible. But real life soon brought pressure. Raising a child on limited resources is never easy, and both parents worked tirelessly to make ends meet. RaMiah expanded her hairstyling side business, often taking on extra clients, while Adelin accepted demanding trucking routes that kept them away for days. Their time together shrank. The romantic spontaneity faded, replaced with talks of daycare, bills, and schedules. This transition from carefree lovers to co-parents revealed cracks in their relationship. Decisions about childcare and finances sparked disagreements. Mariah began to notice how Adelin increasingly insisted on having the final word, even on minor matters like outfits for their daughter. When RaMiah disagreed, he had a way of dismissing her input, leaving her visibly frustrated though unwilling to argue in front of the family. Gradually, the couple stopped presenting themselves publicly as partners. Their once lively social media posts dwindled. The focus shifted entirely to their daughter, while the personal glimpses of their relationship disappeared. RaMiah would occasionally hint at difficulties, saying she felt like nothing she did was good enough, but rarely shared specifics. Her silence suggested a growing unease. What the family couldn't see was how these patterns were escalating. On the surface, they remained cooperative co-parents. Photos still appeared online of shared family gatherings, moments of joint pride in their child. But behind that public image lay an undercurrent of conflict. Text exchanges between them, later examined, revealed troubling dynamics. Discussions about custody or weekend visits often spiraled. If RaMiah delayed responding or asked to alter plans, Adelin's tone shifted quickly. Accusations that she was prioritizing other commitments over their daughter, or demands framed as concern for the child's well-being. The intensity of his messages suggested more than ordinary frustration. To friends and family, they seemed like a young couple navigating the challenges of co-parenting. In reality, the balance of power was tipping dangerously. What began as disagreements over parenting styles was evolving into patterns of control, pressure, and rising hostility. And then came the night of February 9th. Neighbors later recalled the sharp cracks echoing from RaMiah's apartment. At first, they thought it might be firecrackers. By the time police arrived for a welfare check, the truth became clear. RaMiah had been shot multiple times. Her 1-year-old daughter was found nearby, crying but physically unharmed. The scene was horrifying. A young mother's life taken, her child left in the aftermath. The investigation would quickly lead back to Adelin. Yet even as police began piecing together evidence, he inserted himself into the grieving process. He attended her funeral, carried their child, and acted as though he were another bereaved loved one. His presence was chilling, standing among mourners, pretending to share their sorrow, while concealing the role he had played. The betrayal was staggering. A young woman full of promise had been silenced, not by a stranger, but by the man she once trusted most. A child lost her mother before she was old enough to understand. And a family was left to grapple with the unimaginable reality that the person who should have been RaMiah's partner in raising their daughter had instead become her killer. Her story exposes how quickly a relationship can shift from affection to control, and how dangerous those shifts can become when ignored or dismissed. To those on the outside, RaMiah's life looked stable. Pictures of a smiling baby, social posts about family moments. But beneath that surface, warning signs were building. And now, those who love her are left with memories, unanswered questions, and the haunting knowledge that the man once welcomed into their home had ultimately brought violence into RaMiah's life. The digital footprints of their relationship revealed growing cracks beneath the surface. Friends recalled how RaMiah confided that co-parenting was proving far more stressful than she ever imagined. She adored being a mother, committed to raising her daughter in a healthy environment, but Adelin's constant insistence on control left her feeling drained. For the sake of their little girl, she tried to maintain peace, but behind her calm exterior, the pressure was mounting. February 9th, 2024, began as an ordinary winter morning for RaMiah. She woke early, tended to her daughter, and went about her errands. Security cameras later captured her returning to her Baldwin Borough apartment around 2 p.m., balancing shopping bags while guiding her toddler by the hand. She looked at ease, even pausing to chat with a neighbor about the unusually warm February weather before disappearing inside. The scene within her home gave every impression of normalcy. A diaper bag was prepped by the door, hinting at evening plans. The kitchen counter held a water bottle half finished, open mail stacked neatly, and her phone plugged in by the window where she usually left it. Between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m., her phone logs recorded steady text exchanges with Adelin. The conversation began routinely, focused on when he would pick up their daughter and possible dinner arrangements. Yet, as the afternoon wore on, his replies shifted in tone, shorter, sharper, more insistent about timing. During this period, RaMiah also spoke with her mother. She explained that Adelin wanted to have a serious talk about their custody agreement. Although she admitted feeling uneasy, she brushed it off as a conversation that simply needed to happen. She wanted everything to be fair for the baby, her mother later told investigators. But she also wanted space to build her own life. At 5:12 p.m., RaMiah sent her final text to a close friend. The short message explained she was expecting company, but promised to call back later that evening to discuss weekend plans. The friend assumed nothing unusual. RaMiah frequently had people drop by, and there was no reason to suspect otherwise. But when the promised call never came, worries set in. Attempts to reach her by phone were unsuccessful. Calls went directly to voicemail. By 9 p.m., concern had spread through her circle. RaMiah was consistent about staying in touch, particularly after becoming a mother. She never left people guessing about her whereabouts or safety. Her sister Mariah texted about dinner plans and received no answer. Their mother phoned to check on her granddaughter and was met with silence. With each unanswered attempt, dread grew heavier. By 10 p.m., multiple relatives and friends were desperately trying to reach her, but her phone remained dark. Since that final 5:12 p.m. message, there had been no activity, no responses, behavior entirely out of character. The silence was chilling for those who knew how vigilant RaMiah had become about keeping loved ones updated. What nobody realized was that the evening had already spiraled into tragedy. The conversation meant to resolve custody matters had escalated into something far more sinister. The man who once pledged to build a future with her had instead chosen to shatter it. At approximately 4:30 p.m., an emergency call from a neighbor began to uncover the horrific reality. Just minutes earlier, Mrs. Henderson, RaMiah's longtime neighbor, had been folding laundry when she heard a rapid series of popping noises through the walls. At first, she dismissed it as firecrackers. Neighborhood children were notorious for setting them off. She returned to her chores, but an unsettling quiet quickly fell. Normally, RaMiah's apartment was alive with sound, the television, playful giggles, or the rhythm of daily life. That silence gnawed at her. By 4:25 p.m., unease outweighed dismissal. Mrs. Henderson stepped outside, approached RaMiah's door, and knocked gently. No answer. She knocked harder, calling out her name. Still nothing. The silence pressed back at her like a weight. She knew RaMiah's habits. This was her usual time to be home, especially with her daughter. Her heart racing, Mrs. Henderson pulled out her phone and dialed 911. Her voice trembled as she explained her concern. Strange noises, silence afterward, no response from the young mother. Something isn't right, she insisted to the dispatcher. Baldwin Borough police arrived in under 6 minutes. Approaching the apartment with routine caution, officers announced themselves loudly, conducting a welfare check. The front door was unlocked. With weapons drawn, they pushed it open. Inside, the living room appeared orderly at first glance. Furniture in place. No signs of forced entry, nothing immediately screaming of violence. But one officer's instincts told him otherwise. Further inside, the devastating truth revealed itself. RaMiah's body lay sprawled on the living room floor, riddled with multiple gunshot wounds across her chest and torso. Officers checked for vitals, but found none. The 20-year-old mother who had been laughing with a neighbor just hours earlier was gone. Then came a sound that seared itself into the memory of those present. Faint whimpers from the bedroom. Officers rushed toward the noise and found RaMiah's 1-year-old daughter sitting in her crib. She was unharmed physically, but the fear in her eyes told a different story. The child had endured the unimaginable, trapped only feet away as her mother's life was taken. Within minutes, the quiet residential complex transformed into a crime scene swarming with law enforcement. Detectives secured the apartment. Evidence technicians began documenting every detail, and Child Protective Services were contacted to ensure the baby's immediate safety. RaMiah's grandmother arrived soon after, her anguished cries echoing through the night as she embraced her great-granddaughter, now left without a mother. The crime scene painted a chilling picture. Multiple shell casings were scattered across the floor, each one representing a deliberate act. Nothing appeared stolen. Her purse sat untouched on the couch, cash and wallet intact. Her keys remained in their usual place on the counter, her coffee cup still warm. There were no signs of forced entry. The unlocked door told investigators all they needed to know. RaMiah had willingly opened it. She trusted the person who stepped inside. This was no random act of violence. It was personal. Someone she knew, someone she trusted with her home and her life, had turned that trust into betrayal. Detectives immediately began piecing together the timeline. Her final text at 5:12 p.m. The neighbors reported noises around 4:30 p.m. The silence that followed all pointed to a narrow window of time. Investigators secured her phone, examined her recent text exchanges, and quickly honed on the man with the most reason to be there that night. Her co-parent, Adelin Itongwa. The calculated nature of the attack was impossible to ignore. RaMiah had believed she was about to discuss custody. Instead, the conversation ended with her life stolen. Her daughter left crying in the next room, and her family left to mourn. This was not just another tragic case. It was a chilling reminder of how quickly a co-parenting arrangement can become dangerous when control and power replace respect and compromise. What looked from the outside like a young mother managing life with an ex-partner was, in reality, a relationship unraveling under hidden tension. And in the end, that unraveling ended in unthinkable violence. The betrayal cut even deeper when investigators learned what happened after crime. The man responsible didn't vanish. He didn't disappear into the shadows. Instead, he stayed close, presenting himself as a grieving partner, even appearing at RaMiah's funeral with their child in his arms. He comforted the very family he destroyed, signed a guest book, and stood among mourners with the secret of his crime heavy on his conscience. This is the story of RaMiah Griffin, a young mother whose life was full of promise, only to be silenced by the very person she should have been able to trust most. It is a true crime case that exposes the lethal dangers hidden in toxic relationships, a story that asks us to recognize the warning signs before it's too late. And yet, even now, the question lingers. How many other women are living under similar shadows, unaware that the person they share their child with may also be the greatest threat to their lives? The investigation quickly moved into its next phase, informing relatives and potential suspects. Among those first contacted was Adelin Itongwa, the father of RaMiah's child and her estranged partner. Dispatch notes indicated that when reached on his trucking route, he sounded devastated, asking immediately about the safety of his daughter. His tone reportedly cracked with emotion as he promised officers he would return to Baldwin Borough at once. Yet, despite this assurance, hours went by without him arriving at the crime scene. Follow-up calls to his phone went unanswered, slipping directly into voicemail. For investigators, this sudden disappearance at such a critical moment raised immediate suspicion. The man who had just sworn he would be there for his daughter and for the investigation had vanished precisely when he was needed most. As news of the homicide spread, Baldwin Borough's small community was rocked to its core. Friends, neighbors, and classmates learned of RaMiah's murder almost instantly through frantic phone calls and rapid-fire social media updates. Tributes began appearing across Facebook and Instagram, where residents expressed disbelief and sorrow. Her sister Mariah, alerted by a panic message, rushed to the apartment complex only to find yellow police tape sealing off the building where her sibling once lived. Former teachers and classmates from Esto Rocks High School, where RaMiah had graduated just 2 years earlier, joined the outpouring. They shared pictures, stories, and memories of her energy and determination. Teachers remember her bright smile. Peers spoke of her warmth. A young mother who had worked so hard to build a future was suddenly gone, and the entire borough felt the loss. Local reporters soon converged on the neighborhood, but detectives revealed little. The police confirmed an active homicide investigation, but withheld most details. Even so, one reality was already indisputable. The killer had been someone close to RaMiah. Whoever entered her apartment that afternoon was a person she trusted enough to open her door to. The growing challenge for investigators was determining which relationship in her life had turned fatally violent. That evening, as investigators processed the living room and collected shell casings, RaMiah's loved ones wrestled with the incomprehensible. A young woman who had just hours earlier been texting her mother and making weekend plans was now lifeless on the floor. Her daughter, barely a year old, would be left to grow up without her. The grief that swept through family and friends mixed with outrage, creating a cry for justice. Yet the first concrete lead came not from the emotional responses of loved ones, but from the hard evidence investigators began piecing together. Security footage retrieved from the apartment complex provided a chilling window into RaMiah's final afternoon. At roughly 2 p.m., cameras captured her return from errands, arms heavy with shopping bags, her baby balanced on her hip. The scene was ordinary, almost mundane. A mother heading home, smiling briefly at a neighbor as she unlocked her apartment door. That clip, though seemingly harmless, became the last confirmed sighting of her alive. Later recordings painted a darker picture. Surveillance from businesses near the complex showed a figure moving purposefully through the area. The man's height, build, and stride were consistent with Adelin. One time-stamped video placed him within walking distance of RaMiah's building roughly half an hour before neighbors reported the sounds of what they initially mistook for fireworks. Additional store cameras corroborated his presence, showing him navigating side streets and heading directly toward the complex. The precision of his movements suggested he knew exactly where he was going. This was not random wandering. It was a targeted approach. Meanwhile, phone records aligned with these discoveries. At 5:12 p.m., RaMiah sent her final text, casually mentioning to a close friend that someone was coming by to discuss custody matters and promising to call back later. That call never came. Her phone fell silent at precisely the same time the sounds of gunfire were reported, sealing the timeline investigators would later use against her killer. As these threads came together, Adelin's own behavior continued raising alarms. Despite his promise to police that he would return immediately, he never arrived at the crime scene. Instead, he maintained an odd, distant presence, communicating only through occasional calls and texts. On the surface, his online persona painted a portrait of grief. Within hours of the discovery of RaMiah's body, Adelin posted a lengthy tribute on social media. In it, he described his heartbreak, his shock, and his enduring love for their daughter. To outsiders, it read as the raw emotion of a grieving partner. But behind closed doors, a different picture emerged. His private conversations with RaMiah's family and mutual friends carried a distinctly probing tone. Under the guise of offering comfort, Adelin persistently asked for details. What had investigators found? Had neighbors provided statements? What evidence had been collected? Relatives recalled later that his questions felt invasive, more like interrogation than compassion. Instead of focusing on his loss, he seemed consumed with gauging how much information the police had gathered. Investigators soon turned to his digital footprint for answers. Phone location data, subpoenaed from his carrier, contradicted his alibi entirely. While Adelin claimed to have been out of state driving long-haul freight, his GPS history showed repeated connections to towers circling Baldwin Borough. At 2:47 p.m., his phone pinged a tower less than half a mile from RaMiah's residence. At 3:15 p.m., it connected again, this time even closer. Data points mapped his device directly to the vicinity of her apartment during precise window of the homicide. His phone remained there until approximately 4:45 p.m., just 15 minutes after the neighbor's 911 call. Traffic cameras confirmed what the digital trail suggested. A vehicle matching his truck was captured entering Baldwin Borough in the early afternoon and departing the area not long after the estimated time of the shooting. Piece by piece, the evidence contradicted his version of events. Still, perhaps the most unsettling moment came not from data or surveillance, but from Adelin's own performance at RaMiah's funeral. As her family prepared to bury their daughter and grieve the unimaginable, they did not realize they would be sharing that space with the very man suspected of orchestrating her death. The service, held at a modest chapel, overflowed with mourners. Flowers filled the room, gentle hymns played, and photographs of RaMiah smiling with her baby lined the walls. It was a ceremony meant to honor her life, yet became the stage for one of the most disturbing acts of deception the community had ever seen. Adelin arrived dressed in black, their infant daughter cradled in his arms. To all appearances, he was the picture of a grieving father. He moved through the crowd with solemn dignity, shaking hands, hugging relatives, whispering words of sympathy. He carefully signed the guest book, stood prominently during prayers, and even arranged flowers near the casket. But his most chilling act came when he took the podium. In a composed voice, laced with just enough emotion to feel authentic, Adelin spoke about RaMiah as a mother, as a partner, and as a woman he claimed to have cherished. His words painted a portrait of devotion and respect. Yet for those who truly watched him, something seemed amiss. Mariah, RaMiah's sister, later admitted that a quiet unease washed over her during his speech. She couldn't put her finger on it. The measured tone, the way he scanned the room as he spoke, the odd composure that felt more calculated than heartbroken. Her instincts told her something was deeply wrong, even before the evidence confirmed it. As detectives pieced together digital records, surveillance videos, and behavioral red flags, the truth became harder for Adelin to conceal. The timeline was damning. His phone had betrayed him, placing him at the scene. Cameras had tracked his movements. His own actions at the funeral suggested not the devastation of an innocent man, but the composure of someone playing a role. For the Baldwin Borough community, the case was far from over. Investigators had compiled damning evidence. But questions remained. Why had Adelin gone to such lengths to mask his involvement? What drove him to show up at the funeral, standing among grieving family members as if nothing had happened? And how much longer could he maintain the facade before the weight of the evidence pulled all apart? Traffic surveillance provided the final pieces investigators needed. Multiple cameras tracked the vehicle registered to both Adelin and RaMiah as it traveled along the precise route from his supposed trucking location to her apartment. Automated license plate readers confirmed its presence in Baldwin Borough, placing the car directly in RaMiah's neighborhood during the narrow time frame in which her murder occurred. Even more compelling was the digital trail left by his phone. Data revealed that the device arrived near her apartment building, stayed motionless for roughly 20 minutes, then departed at high speed immediately after the gunshots were reported. Investigators described it as a digital map of guilt, the perfect overlay against their established timeline of the crime. On the morning of February 23rd, 2024, just 12 days after RaMiah's body was discovered, law enforcement moved in. Officers arrived at Adelin's residence, armed with an arrest warrant. It was an otherwise quiet Thursday in Baldwin Borough when neighbors looked on in disbelief. They had just watched this man cradle his infant daughter at RaMiah's funeral, appearing broken and bereaved, and now they witnessed him being led away in handcuffs. Adelin offered no resistance. As police read his rights, he remained eerily calm. He didn't proclaim innocence, didn't ask questions, didn't argue. That lack of reaction unsettled even seasoned officers. For RaMiah's grieving family, the news of his arrest landed with brutal timing. They learned of it while on their way to a scheduled custody hearing. The proceeding, meant to decide visitation for RaMiah's little girl, instead became the backdrop for learning that the man fighting for parental rights was accused of being her mother's killer. The charges were devastatingly precise. Adelin was booked on criminal homicide, reflecting the deliberate act of firing 12 rounds at close range inside RaMiah's living room. Prosecutors also added endangering the welfare of a child, acknowledging that the couple's 1-year-old daughter was present during the attack and left alone with her mother's body until authorities arrived. For Baldwin Borough, the revelation was chilling. Residents replayed memories of the funeral. The embraces Adelin exchanged, the tears he shed, the speech he gave about RaMiah's devotion to their daughter. What had seemed like grief now looked like performance. RaMiah's family realized they had comforted the man accused of destroying her. That betrayal compounded their loss, making them victims of manipulation as much as of violence. From the moment he was placed in Allegheny County Jail, Adelin was held without bail. Prosecutors made their stance clear. This case would be pursued with a maximum penalty under Pennsylvania law. To them, this wasn't just a volatile domestic dispute. It was a calculated execution of a young mother determined to build a safe future for her child. The community rallied in defiance of the violence that had taken her life. On February 15th, despite bitter winter cold, hundreds gathered on the football field at Esto Rocks High School, where RaMiah had once cheered and studied. Friends, classmates, teachers, and neighbors laid flowers, lit candles, and shared stories. Her sister Mariah addressed the crowd with steady courage, speaking about her new role as guardian of RaMiah's little girl and her vow to ensure the child grew up surrounded by reminders of her mother's love. A GoFundMe campaign launched by Mariah quickly gained momentum. Though it covered essentials like diapers and formula, its true purpose was larger, creating a foundation for the child's future. Contributions poured in, symbolizing the community's determination to transform grief into lasting support. But RaMiah's death also underscored a national crisis. Research shows that homicide is the leading cause of death for women during pregnancy and the first year postpartum, with intimate partners responsible for the majority of these killings. Women in that period face a 35% higher risk of being murdered, often with firearms involved. RaMiah's case, while uniquely heartbreaking, fit a grim and familiar pattern in the world of true crime. The arrest forced many to reflect on warning signs. Control disguised as affection, patterns of monitoring, and escalating conflict over custody. RaMiah's relatives later spoke openly about behaviors they had noticed: jealousy, isolation, possessiveness, that seemed minor at the time but, in hindsight, marked dangerous red flags. These risk factors mirror countless cases where intimate partner violence escalates to lethal outcomes. For RaMiah's family, the betrayal remained raw. They had trusted Adelin enough to let him participate in the funeral, never knowing investigators were quietly building a case against him using GPS data, surveillance footage, and witness statements. Each revelation compounded their pain, but also their resolve. They would not let RaMiah's story become just another statistic. As the criminal case moved through Allegheny County's courts, the community response deepened. Local businesses contributed to Mariah's fundraiser. Domestic violence organizations reported increased donations. Survivors came forward to share their own experiences, some saying RaMiah's story pushed them to seek help. In death, she became a catalyst for conversations and advocacy efforts she never lived to see. At the heart of it all is her daughter. Mariah has promised that the little girl will grow up knowing who her mother was, the vibrant young woman who loved to dance, dreamed of starting a business, and radiated joy when speaking about her child. Through family stories, photographs, and community support, RaMiah's presence will remain part of her daughter's life. The case against Adelin Itongwa continues. He faces the weight of criminal homicide and child endangerment charges, both carrying the most severe penalties Pennsylvania can impose. Yet for RaMiah's loved ones, no verdict will ever replace her. Their fight now is not only for justice in the courtroom, but for change in society, to protect other young mothers from meeting the same fate. Her story is a haunting reminder of how control, jealousy, and domestic violence can escalate to tragedy. It is also a call to action, for communities to recognize the signs earlier, for systems to respond faster, and for families to believe survivors when they express fear. RaMiah Griffin's life mattered. Her story matters, and her daughter's future depends on all of us learning from the devastating truth left behind. If this case has moved you, make sure you subscribe to True Crimes Venue. We cover the stories that must be told, the ones that give voice to victims and push for change. by subscribing. You help us honor lives cut short by violence and shine a light on the systemic failures that allow these tragedies to happen.